Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Leadership Void podcast. I'm Enrique with my co-host Vince to bring you the best in our veteran, military spouse, and first responder community. And Vince will introduce today's guest.
Hey, thanks, Enrique. I'm so honored today to have Robert Craven. He is the Command Sergeant Major at the United States Corps of Cadets of the and for the United States Military Academy at West Point. So, all right. Welcome to the show, Robert. Tell us a little bit about you.
Wow, first off, beat Navy. Thank you, brothers, for inviting me to be on this podcast. I'm excited here at beautiful West Point where the weather is not bad. I'm just looking forward to this great podcast this morning. So I'm the 26th Command Sergeant Major of the United States Corps of Cadets. And what that means is every day of my life, I live among 4,400 great men and women across this nation. And it's my job to educate, train, and inspire these young men and women to become commissioned officers of character, living the tenets of duty, honor, country. Now, that says a whole lot, but what it really means to me is being able to pour in to future leaders after 30 years of experience. And this has been the most professionally rewarding assignment of my life, brothers.
Outstanding. And I love that position. I love how the NCO complement of our services really does have that charge of instilling those foundational truths to new leaders, right? Especially the officer corps. It's amazing what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about that experience for you and a little bit about the Academy.
I got to tell you, I was, nominated and selected for this position about 2 years ago. And I was a pretty senior sergeant major at that time anyway. As a nominative sergeant major, that means you work exclusively for general officers. But I got to tell you, man, I was a bit nervous when this West Point gig came up because obviously I didn't graduate from here. But I knew so much about the prestige and the mystique of the Academy. So when then Brigadier General Mark Quander hired me on, I was just excited. And when you get in the midst of these young cadets, something magical and special happens. And that's they're hungry for knowledge. They want to learn, but they really want to learn from the NCO perspective. Because when you think about it, these young men and women will graduate. And on day one, they will outrank every sergeant major in the Army. Now, that's powerful because they have positional power, but we got all the experience. So that is a heck of a role for them to navigate. And it's my job in the NCOs here to help them navigate it in such a manner that it doesn't intimidate them, but that mostly they know that, hey, all soldiers are entitled to outstanding leadership. And you as a commissioned officer must provide that leadership, enabling to support the men and women in your charge. So this job really fires me up and motivates me, brothers.
I'm over here charged up and fired up listening to everything you had to say. I forgot to get off mute for a second. 30 plus years, you're doing some great things in the NCO ranks. And here you are now, breathing the future of the United States Army. So what do you continuously do to give back in your community, Robert?
Wow, that's a great question. Just recently, I went back home to my home state of Louisiana. And it was sort of a recruiting trip, but it wasn't. I'm retiring this summer. And so I felt obligated to go back home and tell my Army story. Because, obviously the Army is in a bit of a recruiting crisis is what some people would call it. But I would tell you, I felt a calling to go back to my home state and share the story of a young high school dropout who was a teenage parent who really had no future. And if I would have been left to my own devices and to my own environment, I would not be sitting in this chair today. But yet I also realized that 30 plus years later, I've been to grad school, I've been to combat, and now I'm sitting at West Point. But if you don't reach behind you and try to share the story and bring someone else along on that trip with you, then why are you here? And so I was kind of convicted to do things like that. And I want to continue to still serve and lead in some capacity, even as I retire, because we are soldiers and service members for life. And I think we have a unique opportunity to kind of help young men and women to be inspired into a life of service.
Yeah, absolutely. And we share that same mission here on TLV to continue to reach back and let people know how glorious it was to serve and how,
right.
how well they will make a good decision if they actually do consider service. Not everybody is cut out for it, and we know that.
Yeah, that's true.
But service to our country is probably the highest call that we've ever been involved with. Now, you talk about how you went back to your community reaching back to let them know the story. So what's on the horizon? You mentioned something about the summer, but what's on the horizon for you and West Point?
Wow. Oh, so for me personally, in June, my service to this great nation will culminate, and I will go on transition leave, and try to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Um, so at this level, your next position is like a game of musical chairs. When the music stops, you hope you have a seat. Some people have a seat and some people don't. And it just so happens I didn't have a seat. And my brothers, I am not sad. No one should cry for me, because I tell you what, I just told you some of my story early on. I've been playing with house money, man. Like, there's no way I was supposed to make it to this point. So I'm not going to retire with a bitter attitude, but I am going to retire with a fire in my belly to make sure that men and women across this nation understand that our military is not broken. Our military is not weak. Our military is still filled with what I believe is the best, the brightest, and the most brave men and women across this country, and they're willing to give it all in the name of freedom. So for the Academy, this summer we'll graduate the class of 24. My young cousin is in that class, which is special for me. So we're both going to kind of go out together. And in this summer, West Point will bring in the class of 28, continuing the cycle of building leaders of character since 1802.
You know what? This is a recruitment video. If you haven't heard one right here, boy, look.
I mean, I'm not trying. Well, maybe I am. I don't know. I'm just, my brothers, I'm just trying to tell my story, man, because if I may, it breaks my heart to hear these false narratives in the media. And I'll be careful about what I say, because I realize I'm still a uniformed service member, but I don't live under a rock. And the bottom line is this: I have grown up in a profession that has literally changed my life. 10th grade high school dropout, graduate school with honors at West Point. There is no one that can tell me about the American dream. Hell, I lived it, and I continue to live it. And now I want to share the story with parents and anyone who will listen to say, hey, we need men and women to stand up for this country and defend it. And there are some great benefits that come along with it too. So that does kind of fire me up. I mean, how does it not? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. You know, I have somewhat of a similar story, that I was a father at 18, and I was like, which way do I go? Right.
Roger
So,
that.
so I took a ladder and I took the military, and here I am 20 plus years later and just flourishing. So it is a great opportunity. Don't,
Amen.
don't look at it as a sidebar. No, it is a true trajectory for your life, for your future, to make men and women the way we are professionals today. So kudos to you. Love the story. Keep pressing that story on, because there's some young men and women that need to constantly hear that.
Amen.
What you have done is phenomenal, and we'd love to hear more now about leadership. So, what do you do to continue to sharpen your sword to aid you to thrive in your professional life?
Wow. Well, in true Army and military fashion, brothers, I start my morning every morning off with a little bit of meditation, some prayer, and some physical training. I get out and I do some PT, and I want to continue to do it because I think it's important to keep yourself not just physically fit, but mentally engaged. Doing something hard every day is sort of a mantra that I have. It's not that I climb mountains every day, but I try to do something that gets me out of my comfort zone. Another thing I'd say is professional and personal reading, trying to keep oneself educated, because we get older and the soldiers remain the same age and get younger. That's how that works in the Army, right? So if you can't stay connected to these young folks and reading about different leadership philosophies, you become stale, you know? And I guess finally, the one thing that I really try to do, which is not really profound, but my brothers, I just try to listen to those that I lead. And I mean active listening. That skill has refined itself as I've gotten older, because soldiers want to be heard. They really do. And sometimes you may not even have the answer, but there's something magical when you can sit down across from someone that has a problem and they felt heard. I think both parties can win from that situation. So that's kind of some of the things that I do. And then finally, I try to keep people around me that keep me honest, that keep me grounded, and that can tell me, hey, Rob, check it out, bro. Like, you're not hot stuff, man. Like, I know you've done a lot of things and you might have a bit of an ego, but you might want to tone it down a bit. That stuff is important, bro.
Absolutely. And great tips on how to stay humble in leadership, and definitely listening. And Vince will vouch for this. Our podcast started off of survey that just screamed leaders need to listen. So
Amen.
very, very profound and very on point points there. So 30 years, good Lord, right? That's a long
I'm old,
time when
bro.
you talk about it. When you talk about it, 30 years, and there's a lot of advice that have come in and out of your life there. So what advice did you receive that you would like to pass on to an emerging leader today?
There's so much, man. And I'll be honest with you, I have some notes in front of me, but right now I'm just feeling led by sort of the spirit, man, to just give it unfiltered and really, truly authentic. So I'll go back to something that I sort of brought out. I'm at West Point, where literally, man, these are some of the best and brightest young men and women, not just in the nation, across the world. And imagine, if you will, you're a part of this institution and you have astronauts who graduated from here, billionaires who have graduated from here. I mean, before I got here, I didn't realize how many West Point graduates truly run the world. I'm just being honest with you. And so what comes with that could be this air of entitlement, if I'm being real with you, and this air of being attached to a legacy that is elite, but soldiers don't need elitists as leaders. Soldiers need a young, humble lieutenant who knows how to read a freaking map and listen to his NCO when things go wrong. And so that is how I try to insert myself here. I'm not diminishing West Point. It is a great institution. But I tell the cadets, nobody really cares how much you know until they know that you give a you know what. Your soldiers don't care that you're a Rhodes Scholar. They don't care how many theses you wrote and how smart you were in physics. LT, can you get me across that mountain ridge? And can you make sure that we have all of our supplies and that once we charge this hill, we will take minimal casualties, if not any at all? And these young men and women have to understand that. And so that is one of the things that I try to really immerse myself in, because there is not a single book in this institution that's going to prepare them for what's waiting for them across the graduation stage.
No, you're on point, man. You talk about truth to power there. You talk about character, being integrity, all the things that books technical cannot teach you is really being instilled through this young man right here for all these young cadets. So they're very grateful for you. They probably don't say it, but they definitely are appreciative of everything you have done for them.
I love them, man. I love them. I just got to say this. I tell the Corps I love them a lot. Listen, love, the word love has gotten a bad rap. People think because you love your soldiers, they mean it's weak. No, it doesn't. People think when you say you love, it's diminishing a leader's capacity. Man, that is some bull crap. But I do tell these people, these young men and women, this. I love you when I do, but there's a group of people I love more than you. The enlisted sons and daughters of this nation who will no doubt lay down their lives executing the orders of a brand new lieutenant from West Point. Yeah, I love them a little bit more because I've been one of them. And I know what they're willing to sacrifice on behalf of listening to their leader. So they've got to get this stuff right, man.
Hey, totally agree 110 and 1,000% on that, Robert. Love everything you shared. One last great nugget. I know you have this one too. Most memorable leadership aha moment. Love to share after 30 years with our audience. Watch out.
Wow.
We're ready. We're ready for it.
Here it goes, brother. About 26 years ago, in the 101st Airborne Division in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, I'll never forget. I was promoted to Sergeant E5, entry-level NCO. And we were out in the field. And so it's time to eat chow. We got to eat dinner, right? So 3 to 5 meters, because no one stands in a straight line in the field tactically, right? 3 to 5 meters staggered. Got your weapons at the ready until the first sergeant calls you up, because the first sergeant used to serve chow. And I scanned around the line and I noticed something. All the leaders were at the end of the line. And so I was a specialist a few moments ago, and my natural inclination was to get into the front of the line. And then one of the NCOs was like, hey, Sergeant. Nah, dude, we're back here. Now, this ain't profound or nothing, but I remembered in that moment thinking, damn, it's not about me. Like, nobody cares. And it's not that they didn't care, but it's in that moment I realized that, hey, bro, leaders eat last for a reason. And that day I really feel in my heart is when I became committed to the profession, because I realized in that moment that my well-being took a backseat to the men and women that I was now in charge of. And brothers, we've been eating last, and I've been eating last for 30 years. I know there's a book about it. I really didn't read it, but I didn't need the book to tell me about eating last. I mean, we've been doing that forever, right? again, not the most profound moment, but for me, for a young 21-year-old sergeant who was a high school dropout and I was a specialist and feed me first. Nah, sir, you get to the end of the line, bro. So I needed that moment. And I try to remember that moment every day in my life, man, in some way that I live it, you know? So I hope that was a pretty good aha moment, but it was one that kind of shaped me.
Well, not just one that shaped you, one that both Vince and I have lived. But I tell you, don't diminish the power of that, because if we had those moments right now in corporate America, we would be phenomenal.
Wow.
If we had leaders that would eat last in corporate America, you could not shake a stick at them, right? Because we would definitely be a different nation.
I hear you,
And
my
so,
brother.
so very profound share there, and I hope that all corporate America is listening, because you need it. So you talk about challenges. This is one of those challenges in leadership as we see across the landscape of our nation. Folks not understanding what true leadership requires of them. So, what are certain strategies that you use with your teams, with your staff, when times of change and challenge come?
Wow, that's a great question. And I got to be honest here, man. I'm speaking from hindsight now because I didn't know the things that I know sitting right here in front of you. I've been a sergeant major for 10 years, believe it or not. And so I've been around leadership for a while, and even as a sergeant major, I've grown. But here's one thing, I'll harken back to active listening, but I want to build on that. Once you listen to your soldiers, you have to realize that as a leader, in my opinion, we have three roles. You're a communicator, you're an advocator, and you have to root out agitators. Be a communicator of change. Sometimes leaders have to be the communicators in chief on behalf of a leader who cannot touch subordinates. We call it commander's intent. I'm sure corporate America has some intent too. Where I see leaders go wrong is they hijack the intent and try to create their own agendas. No, man, keep it pure. Keep it what it's supposed to be, not your intent, the commander's intent. Additionally, most subordinates and most soldiers simply want to know what's going on. And I think sometimes leaders, we fail in how we communicate, when we communicate, and even the folks that we communicate with. Here comes the advocators. Leaders also have an obligation to be advocators of change when it's needed. You can't be scared to tell a general or to tell a colonel, hey, ma'am, sir, check this out. I know you want to change a few things. Too much, too fast. Let's either dial it back or let's meet in the middle. And then finally, we've all got agitators. They know it all. They probably know your job better than you, and they probably do. But the problem is with the agitator is that they simply want to be heard as well, but they would rather sow the seeds of discontent. I think leaders need to root out and confront agitators and try to bring them onto the fold, because most of the folks that I've seen who are so-called agitators are talented people, but they use their skills in a different way. Let me put a finer point on it. Every leader, in my opinion, we have an obligation to help people unlock their superpower. To me, that means what are the unique talents that only I can do? And then once you help young soldiers unleash and identify their superpower, now you got to help them cultivate it and grow it. Maybe it's speaking, maybe it's motivation, maybe it's working hard. I mean, I had leaders to extract my superpower out of me and use my powers for good and not for bad. And I love getting into this area and talking about it and living it. It ain't easy. It's hard as hell. It's emotionally draining. I mean, when you deal with human beings 24/7, but at the end of the day, this is what we signed up for, man. I mean, you can't lead men and women like robots, not when they have souls inside of them.
And folks that are listening in, before he becomes a speaker series out there in the nation, how do we get a hold of Robert Craven or the United States Military Academy at West Point?
All right, so I'll keep it simple. So you can simply really just Google admissions at West Point and our page will come up. But my email is robert.craven@westpoint.edu. We have an outstanding admissions team that can take anyone who's interested through the application process. We have a preparatory school. This place has a lot of opportunity. But if I could, I got to put in a shameless plug for enlisting, and not just the Army, but any service. Because I will say this, In my opinion, man, West Point doesn't have a recruiting problem. And here's why. America fundamentally understands the difference between going to West Point and enlisting in the Army. West Point is one of the greatest brands. It's like Coca-Cola, man. You hear that name and you know it. But why is there such a negative stigma attached to enlisting in the Army? That is where we're struggling. I truly believe in my heart that this generation gets beat up a little bit too much. They want to be inspired. In my opinion, they see no inspiration. And when they don't see inspiration, they can't gravitate to that thing that attracted men and women like myself and yourselves and others. I think in some way, we have to be the best tellers of our own stories as enlisted and senior NCOs across the military. You know, it's okay to tell a young man or woman that the mission of the Army is to close with and destroy the enemies of our nation. That's not bad. I mean, we need it. But it's also inherent that we tell the stories of how you can be built and fortified as a human being by joining an organization like the Armed Forces. So,
folks, we're going to make sure to have those links to get a hold of Robert and West Point as part of the show. And, you know, Robert, as you're talking, I was thinking about, man, enlistment is a valuable thing for our nation. And we are having some trouble with numbers, but we've seen these days before, right? And we've seen these days before. Well, after over 30 years, we all have seen the up and downs of enlistment. But this last week, I helped my nephew kind of mentor him in enlisting in the Army. So I feel real good about myself.
There we go. We got him. I like it.
Well, folks, but we'll make sure to have all that as part of the video and show notes. If you'd like to get a hold of the TLV, the leadership void at gmail.com is where you'll send that correspondence. If you'd like to hear a special guest or a topic covered that you would like for us to discuss, please do it by those means.
Yeah, and absolutely. For those who are out there, listen, happy belated Veterans Day. It's already passed. We hope you had a great day, honor and serve that you have done. And also we want to thank our sponsors, VEI, Triple Nickel, and FAVOB. But today was all about Robert Craven. He's here from all the way from Louisiana, 30 plus years as Command Sergeant Major at West Point. Thank you for your time. God bless and have a great day.
My brothers, thank you. And thank you for your service and what you continue to do. Thank you.